Make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point. What is good, y'all? Welcome back to the Puncher's Point. Emanuel Navarrete versus Sugar Nunez. Let's talk about it. Emanuel Navarrete becomes unified WBO and IBF junior lightweight champion by defeating Sugar Nunez by 11th round TKO. And I'm going to be the first one to admit it. I was dead wrong about this fight. I really was. You see, I thought that if it would go to distance, it was going to favor Sugar Nunez. I thought that if it was going to end in a knockout, Sugar Nunez was going to be the one to do it. I was clearly wrong. Emanuel Navarrete, again, he becomes unified junior lightweight champion. And not only that, he masterclassed Eduardo Nunez in this fight. And it seemed like Sugar Nunez was fighting starstruck in a way. In case you guys didn't know, to go back to it, when Emanuel Navarrete was winning his first world title, Sugar Nunez was a young up-and-coming boxer. He was on the rise, and he said that he looked up to Emanuel Navarrete. He said he watched all of his fights, despite them being only 3 years apart. Sugar Nunez was a big fan of Navarrete, and it seemed like when Núñez stepped into the ring with him, it seemed like the lights were too bright. It seemed like the pressure was too big. And there was always that question. Despite my prediction, I did say that there were a lot more questions on Núñez's side than Emanuel Navarrete. And one of the big questions was, can Eduardo Nunez find a way to win this fight, or is Navarrete too experienced? And judging by that fight, Navarrete was just too experienced. And it was interesting because I also got a detail wrong in that prediction episode. I said that his last fight was Liam Wilson. That's wrong. His last fight was Charlie Suarez, and it wasn't a good fight for Emanuel Navarrete. So there was a lot riding on this fight for Emanuel Navarrete to win. And it's interesting when you look at it because we questioned the lack of competition that Sugar Nunez had fought leading up to Emanuel Navarrete. And we're going to talk about the fight grades and what's next for Navarrete and all those types of things. But overall, Navarrete proved that he's got a lot more gas in the tank, and he proved that he's not declining by no means. You see, Navarrete is Navarrete. He's going to fight the way he fights, whether that's sloppy or whether that's a masterclass performance. Navarrete has one style of fighting, and it either works or it don't. But I don't think he's declining anytime soon. But with all of that being said, let's get to the fight grades. We're going to talk about strategy. Now, as far as the keys to victory, when I was talking about the keys to victory between both of these fighters, Navarrete, I had 3 keys to victory. It was use your range and your angles, which he did a great job of. It seemed like Núñez was trying to track him the entire fight, and it seemed like Núñez was fighting at Navarrete's pace. And I think that was the first mistake from Núñez, was he was fighting at Navarrete's pace. The range, the angle cutting, it was all very confusing for Núñez. So I would say that would be the first one. The second one was finding success with the left hook. And boy, did he ever, because this fight ended in an 11th round TKO, a doctor stoppage, and that eye was brutal. I mean, not only was it swollen shut, it was cut wide open. And look, as much as you would have liked to see Núñez try to give it an extra fight, I don't think that 6 minutes would have been beneficial for Núñez in this fight. You see, Navarrete did a great job of fighting that left hook, and that left hook was clicking on all cylinders on Núñez. And you can credit that left hook for the reason why Navarrete had so much success. You can credit that left hook for the reason why Núñez's eye was as busted as it was. And that left hook, it just worked to perfection. I think the reason why is because Navarrete, he was the aggressor. And I feel like if there was a punch he was going to point to, it was going to be that punch. And I think that also one of the factors that I didn't take into effect when predicting this episode was how much bigger Navarrete was going to be than Núñez. Núñez is a strong boxer, don't get me wrong. But when Navarrete is looking about 15 pounds heavier than you, there's a problem there. And I feel like the weight, the pressure, and just Navarrete's ability to control the pace, push Núñez back, keep hitting him with that jab, which was the third key to victory that I had for Navarrete. I feel like he put all those keys to victory together, and he put a masterclass performance. So the range was there. He was sticking the jab. That left hook was clicking. And then on top of that, he started landing the right a lot more. He started pushing Núñez back. When he got into the inside, he started throwing those uppercuts that he's really good at throwing. And there were a lot of times in this fight where I thought Núñez was going to get knocked out. Núñez took a lot of punishment in this fight, a lot. And I got to give Núñez a lot of credit. I mean, super tough fighter. He didn't give up, a heart of a warrior. He didn't touch the canvas, but at the same time, when you go and you look at that fight, Núñez was just too tough for his own benefit. He was just too tough. And I feel like that eye, again, being swollen shut, you can't see out of that eye. It was busted open early. It just wasn't a good. It just wasn't a good fight for Núñez. It seemed like he fought starstruck out there. It seemed like he didn't press the trigger. It seemed like he wasn't bringing the pressure to Navarrete for most of this fight. It seemed like he wasn't clicking on the punches that he should have been clicking with. And again, these were the keys to victory that I had for Sugar Nunez. First off, I mean, you strike first, and Navarrete was the one to do it every single time. You're over here trying to track him down. He's clipping you with these jabs. He's controlling the range and controlling the pace. He's cutting these angles on you. You're not striking first. It seemed like he was very cautious out there, very conservative. And that's not the Sugar Nunez that I've seen in so many fights. And you could point to, again, the competition differentiating between his previous opponents and Navarrete. We could talk about how he fought two decent level competition fighters. We could talk about Rikishi, we could talk about Diaz, how he fought those two guys and how he went the distance with them. It seemed like once he took that step above, once he took that leap, it seemed like Núñez kind of slowed down a bit. But overall, he didn't strike first. When you're going up against somebody like Navarrete, you have to strike first. You got to intercept his attack before he plans it. It's as simple as that. You got to control the pace against Navarrete, and Núñez didn't do that. Again, like, catch him coming forward. You didn't catch him coming forward because every single time he would pressure you, he would push you up against the ropes. You got to stand your ground. And it's tough, especially against a fighter who's bigger than you, but you have to stand your ground in order to catch him coming forward. And Núñez didn't do that. Again, he kept getting pushed back up against the ropes. He kept on getting bullied in that ring. He kept getting clipped on the inside with punches he shouldn't have got clipped with. Overall, it just wasn't a good game plan for Núñez. He didn't stick his ground. He didn't hold his ground, and Navarrete took advantage of that. But if there's one key to victory that Núñez did very well in this fight, and I wish he did a little bit more of it, was targeting the body. Now, in all hindsight, when he was targeting that body, the punches, it didn't seem like they had a lot of steam on them. But when they did, when he got his range correct, when he would throw those body punches when Navarrete didn't expect it, it would bother Navarrete. I mean, you could tell on Navarrete's face that those body punches were bothering him. The problem with what Núñez was doing was you can keep on throwing body punches, but you got to throw something to set it up. You got to throw something following it. And Núñez was just focused on the body. He wasn't following up with those punches. He wasn't throwing any feints to get to the body. He wasn't throwing any punches before he would get to the body. It just seemed like he kept targeting that body. And eventually, when you keep on targeting that body, Núñez kept leaving his head open. On the inside exchanges, Navarrete was able to clip him with some uppercuts, some hooks. He was able to clip him with the right straight. And overall, I just feel like Núñez was so focused on that body, which he should have been, but I don't feel like he had anything to follow up with. I feel like he didn't have anything to lead to the body punches. And I feel like that right there is a reason why Núñez did not have a lot of success in that fight. But if there was one key to victory, if there was one thing that he was doing that was working, it was those body punches. And towards the later in the rounds, he had a little bit of success, but you could tell for the majority of that fight, Navarrete was controlling the entire fight. So as far as strategy between both fighters, not just Navarrete, but between both fighters, I got to give it a 7 out of 10. Navarrete did everything that he had to do to win this fight. And Núñez, he didn't do enough to win this fight. He didn't stick to the keys to victory that at least I had. I don't think he stuck to his coach's game plan. And at the end of the day, it resulted in a Navarrete victory. Now, we go to the excitement grade. It was an exciting fight. And in the beginning, it started off pretty boring. I mean, both fighters, they were feeling out each other. And I liked what Núñez was doing. He was basically trying to get a feel of Navarrete. There were some rounds where he was trying to win in the beginning. And I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't have Núñez winning a round until the 5th round. So the beginning rounds, the first 2 to 3, they were close, but I gave him to Navarrete because there was more action. And again, like I said, it just seemed like Núñez was too conservative out there. So the beginning of the fight, it wasn't all that memorable. Then as the fight started picking up, you started seeing Navarrete masterclass him. But then as the rounds later progressed, Núñez had his moments. They had a lot of good inside back and forth exchanges. But again, you guys know my rule. If one fighter is dominating the entire fight, I don't consider that an exciting fight. I consider that one fighter doing what he's supposed to do and just masterclassing his opponent. However, Núñez did have some moments in those later rounds. There were some moments where you look and you're like, what a good shot by Núñez. There were some moments where he would finish off the round late. And so because of that, I'm going to give the excitement a 7.5 out of 10. There were a decent amount of exciting moments in this fight. But again, when one fighter is controlling the pace, when one fighter is dominating the entire fight, it's hard to call it an exciting fight. So I got to give the excitement a 7.5 out of 10. Now the stakes. What was on the line for both of these fighters? Well, it was a unified title fight, so you got the IBF and the WBO championships on the line. Sugar Nunez, an undefeated fighter. I mean, again, I talked about how dominant he was. 29-0 with 27 knockouts. Or excuse me, 29-1 with 27 knockouts. You look at Navarrete having that not so great no contest fight against Suarez. It was time for Navarrete to make a statement against Núñez, and Núñez had to prove that he is next level competition. And so both these guys had stakes on the line as far as reputation, as far as titles. So as far as the stakes, I got to give it an 8.5 out of 10. When you're talking about two Mexican boxers, look, Mexican boxers, when they go up against each other, when a Mexican boxer and a Mexican boxer go up against each other, it's an all-out war. I mean, that's what you're going up against. That's what you have to live up to. When two Mexican fighters go up against each other is an all-out war. And the expectation for this fight was it was going to be fireworks. I said it myself. It was going to be fight of the year. It was going to be a candidate, at least, for fight of the year. I don't think it lived up to that expectation, but these were the stakes that were on the line. When both these guys stepped into the ring against each other, two power punchers, two fighters who got very different Mexican styles, but they both got Mexican styles of fighting, you're expecting fireworks. And I feel like there were a lot of stakes on the line as far as their reputation, what to expect out of this fight, and what was on the line itself with the titles. So as far as excitement, I got to give it an 8.5 out of 10. And then last but not least, impact. How does this impact the division or the sport? Well, I'm not going to lie to you guys. After this win, I do feel like Navarrete is the number one 130-pounder in this division. That doesn't mean I'm saying that he's going to beat all these guys in the 130-pound division. But what I am saying is when you're holding 2 out of 4 of the most important belts in the division, I consider you the number one fighter. So in my opinion, this fight, as far as impact, it makes Navarrete the number one 130-pounder in this division. Now, it's a good division. You got O'Shaquie Foster in this division, Lamont Roach. You look at guys who are probably going to come into this division, guys like Ray Ford. So the 130-pound division, it's a good division, and it's going to be interesting to see what Navarrete does in this division, who he fights. Obviously, in the post-fight interview with Chris Mannix, he said that he doesn't know what's next for him. He said that's not something he's really thinking about right now. So there's not a clear context on who he's going to fight next, which kind of leaves some point off of the impact grade. But as far as impact, I got to give it an 8 out of 10. You solidified yourself as of right now as the number one 130-pounder, basically by accomplishments because you hold 2 out of the 4 major belts. You got some decent competition in there and some stylistic matchups that are going to be interesting to see him go up against guys like Lamont Roach and guys like O'Shaquie Foster. It's going to be interesting to see how he goes up against those guys, especially those guys being pure boxers, maybe not as unorthodox as Emanuel Navarrete is. So it's going to be interesting to see how those styles go up against each other if they do decide to fight. But the majority of it, during that fight, you see O'Shaquie Foster and Ray Ford, chirping back and forth at each other. So I do expect that fight to be made before the Navarrete fight. I think both those guys are down for it. Navarrete, I expect him to take some time off, maybe like 4 to 6 months before he announces his next fight. And we're going to have to see what happens there. But overall, I hope that the 130-pound division stays active so that it makes Navarrete and his team's decision easier on who he's going to fight next. So as far as impact, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I do think it impacts the division. However, I do think it also leaves some things on the table. And so when we go to the overall grade for this fight is going to be a 7.75 out of 10. Again, I don't think that's going to be in the top 10 for this season or this year. However, it was a decent fight. I do think it's a relatively fair grade to put it at. And overall, again, strategy, got to give it a 7 down the middle. One guy did his job, the other one didn't. Excitement, there were some exciting moments, but one guy was controlling the pace of the fight. Stakes between the belts on the line, the reputation with Navarrete needing this win in order to stay relevant, in order to prolong his career versus Núñez trying to take that extra level. I do believe the stakes were high at an 8.5. And then as far as impact, I give that an 8. Navarrete proves that he is the number one 130 pounder as of right now. But at the end of the day, because there's not a clarified statement on who's next for Navarrete, it leaves some things on the table. So I think 7.75 out of 10 is a fair grade to put this at. And so, what is next for Emanuel Navarrete? Well, again, I've already said it. I expect him to take at least like between 4 to 6 months before announcing what his next fight is. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I wouldn't mind seeing him versus Lamont Roach. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. I think that's a good fight to make, but you know how it is. Both of those companies really don't do a lot of business together. I think a more ideal matchup would probably be him and O'Shaquie Foster, considering, you know, the top ranked ties. But again, Navarrete, I think he's going to take a little bit of time to himself, and I think he's going to wait to see how this pans out. Now, if he's looking for a fight while those fights are being made, then again, who knows? I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Baranchyk. You know, I don't think that would be a bad fight. Get that rematch against Baranchyk. But in reality, I think I would like to see Lamont Roach, but I think O'Shaquie Foster is a more doable fight. But the only way I think that O'Shaquie Foster fight happens is if Foster defeats Ray Ford. And I think that the Ray Ford fight is going to happen before O'Shaquie Foster versus Navarrete. But I think that's the only way that we get that O'Shaquie Foster fight, is if O'Shaquie Foster defeats Ray Ford. Because if Ray Ford defeats Foster, then it's going to be a lot harder to make that fight happen. Again, you know how it is when two separate companies are coming together. It makes it real tough. And again, I don't believe O'Shaquie Foster. I'm not sure if O'Shaquie Foster is still under the top ranked banner. Y'all are going to have to let me know in the comments. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But if he is, I feel like that fight's easy to make. I feel like it's a fight that Bob Arum should make in order to spice up this 130-pound division. And overall, it's very uncertain what's happening next with Emanuel Navarrete or where he's going to take his career. But if he's going to fight somebody, I would like to see him in Lamont Roach. I do think that he's got a style that could give Lamont Roach problems because it's so unpredictable. But I also think Lamont Roach has a style that can make Emanuel Navarrete uncomfortable because of how pure of a boxer he really is and how he's able to go toe-to-toe with guys like Pitbull, Cruz, and Gervonta Davis. It's going to be interesting to see how he handles the power of Navarrete. So with all of that being said, we're going to have to wait and see. It's very blurry when it comes to Emanuel Navarrete, but I would like to see him versus Lamont Roach. The more ideal fight to make would be him versus O'Shaquie Foster, but O'Shaquie Foster has to defeat Ray Ford in order for that to happen. If Ray Ford defeats Foster, then I don't see Ford and Navarrete meeting up. I'm going to be honest with you. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens with Emanuel Navarrete. And with all that being said, it's time for us to log off. Make sure y'all continue to tune in to the Puncher's Point. Make sure y'all tune into the prediction episode. If y'all really want to see how wrong I was, please go tune into that prediction episode. And again, make sure y'all tune into all the other previous episodes we've had. I'll probably see y'all in a week, maybe a little bit sooner. You know, we got some surprises coming on this podcast, so make sure y'all continue to tune into the podcast. Make sure y'all like, share, comment, subscribe to the YouTube, subscribe to the podcast platforms. And last but not least, make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point.